The snow had started falling early that December morning, blanketing the sidewalks of our quiet neighborhood in soft white. Inside our modest two-story house, the scent of cinnamon oatmeal and toasted bread filled the kitchen as I set the table for breakfast. Mark was already dressed for work, sipping coffee in his usual spot by the window, his eyes scanning the school newsletter. Our daughter Lily, 10 years old and always full of wonder, was crouched by the living room window with her sketch pad, trying to capture the way snowflakes clung to the glass. Life wasn't extravagant, but it was warm. Our days moved in a gentle rhythm. I worked as a third-grade teacher at the local elementary school, and Mark taught biology at the nearby high school. We weren't rich by anyone's standards, but we had built a quiet, dependable life. Our home, with its faded wallpaper and uneven floorboards, echoed with laughter, bedtime stories, and the soft hum of Lily's pencil scratching paper. Lily had always been different from her cousins. While other children her age chased soccer balls or practiced piano pieces for competitions, Lily found joy in art. She spent hours creating scenes from her imagination: forests, fairies, animals in top hats. Her room was a gallery of her world. I loved her work, though my parents never seemed to understand it. My parents, Vivian and Charles, lived only 45 minutes away in their towering Victorian mansion. Their world was one of cocktail parties, charity boards, and country club luncheons. My mother had once been crowned president of the local women's league and had kept her grip on social status ever since. My father, a retired judge, carried himself with the kind of stiff decorum that made casual conversations feel like courtroom testimonies. Every Sunday, we visited them, as if by unspoken contract. The routine had started years ago when Lily was a baby. Back then, I thought it might help build a bond. But with each passing year, it became clearer that their expectations did not include Lily's world of paints and paper wings. My sisters, Vanessa and Rachel, had married men who wore cufflinks to breakfast and discussed tax law or cardiovascular procedures over dinner. Their children, two from each, were what my parents called well-adjusted and promising. Private school, extracurriculars, awards framed on the wall. Every achievement was celebrated with a post on social media and a carefully curated family photo. Lily, on the other hand, was always gently pushed aside. When she showed her drawings, Vivian would offer a tight smile and change the subject. Charles rarely even looked up from his wine glass. At one point, they gifted her a math workbook for her 8th birthday, followed by a comment about encouraging her to pursue something real. Lily had thanked them politely and tucked it away without complaint. It wasn't always so obvious. The small comments accumulated like frost on a window, slowly, until one day, you could no longer see clearly through the glass. With Christmas fast approaching, the pressure to attend the annual family gathering began to build. My mother had already sent out the formal invitation, an embossed card delivered by mail, complete with a list of dress codes and arrival times. Lily read it and then quietly set it down. I asked her if she was excited, and she shook her head without saying a word. Later that night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked if she could stay home this year. I gently told her we'd all be going, and she nodded, but the usual sparkle in her eyes dimmed. Mark noticed it too. He tried to cheer her up by taking her to pick out a new sweater for the party. They returned with a red one, simple and soft, with a tiny stitched flower on the sleeve. Lily hugged it to her chest like a small treasure. The week before Christmas, I found her sitting in her room, wrapping something in tissue paper. It was a watercolor painting, a small one, painted on thick textured paper. A Christmas wreath with blue and silver accents, the kind my mother always hung on the front door. Lily had added little gold stars in the corners. She wanted to give it to Grandma. I felt a mixture of hope and dread. The Friday before the gathering, I called my sister Vanessa to ask what her kids were getting from our parents. She mentioned a violin for her daughter and a new gaming laptop for her son. Rachel's kids were getting museum memberships and coding camp packages. I didn't even ask what Lily was getting. I knew. That night, Mark and I sat in the living room, both pretending to read while the silence between us grew heavier. We were thinking the same thing. This year would be no different. Lily would walk into that house with her small gift and her big heart, only to be dismissed again. But what else could we do? If we didn't go, there would be fallout. My parents would call us dramatic. My sisters would remain silent. We would be accused of isolating Lily, of keeping her from family. Saturday morning, the day before Christmas Eve, I packed our bags. Lily carefully placed her painting in a padded envelope, then zipped it into her backpack. We loaded the car and pulled out of our driveway just as the snow began to fall again. As we drove toward that grand house on Birchfield Lane, I watched Lily in the rearview mirror, tracing patterns on the window with her fingertip. Mark reached over and held my hand. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew. This year, something had to change. The drive to Birchfield Lane felt longer than usual, despite the light traffic and the still falling snow. As the houses became grander and the trees along the road straighter and older, I felt my stomach tighten. Mark kept his hands steady on the wheel, but his jaw was set in a way that told me he was preparing himself. Lily sat in the back, unusually quiet. She had her red sweater on, the one she'd picked herself, and her small backpack sat beside her, the envelope with her painting carefully zipped inside. When we turned onto my parents' street, we saw the mansion already glowing with lights, its tall windows lit with warm gold, the large wreath Lily had painted hanging on the front door, only, of course, it wasn't hers. The real one, large and expensive-looking, was covered in red ribbons and white roses, a sharp contrast to the simpler version Lily had imagined. Vanessa's black SUV was already parked in the circular driveway, and Rachel's sedan sat just beside it. From inside the house, music floated out, instrumental Christmas carols played softly, the kind my mother always said made the place feel elegant. As we stepped out of the car, Lily tightened her grip on my hand. I looked down at her, saw the nervous look in her eyes, and bent slightly to whisper that we'd only stay as long as we had to. She gave a small nod and adjusted the strap on her backpack. Mark opened the door for us and we stepped into the foyer, the blast of warm air carrying with it the scent of pine, cinnamon, and something sugary from the kitchen. The towering Christmas tree stood in the center of the front room, as it always did, 12 feet tall and dripping with gold and silver ornaments. I could already hear the voices of my nieces and nephews from the living room, their laughter loud and familiar. My mother appeared from around the corner, wearing a cream-colored cashmere top and a pair of pearl earrings that caught the light. She gave me a brief air kiss on the cheek and moved quickly past Lily, offering only a glance in her direction. "You're late," she said without emotion, before motioning us into the living room. Mark said nothing. He helped Lily out of her coat, then handed me his before walking ahead, hands in his pockets. In the living room, Vanessa and Rachel were seated near the fireplace, drinks in hand. Their children were gathered around the tree, already opening a few early gifts. Vanessa's son held up a remote-controlled drone, while Rachel's daughter flipped through the pages of a thick science encyclopedia. No one seemed to notice us at first. Then my father called from the corner, where he sat in his favorite chair with a glass of scotch. He greeted me using my maiden name, never acknowledging my married name, as if Mark still didn't fully count. Lily stepped forward carefully and reached into her bag, pulling out the small envelope with the painting. She walked toward my mother, who was arranging a stack of gifts on a side table. "I made this for you," she said softly. My mother glanced at it, barely unfolding the tissue. Her lips curled slightly as she said something about how charming it was, then set it aside on a shelf behind her, out of view. Lily stood still for a moment, her hands clasped in front of her, then slowly walked back to sit beside me. Dinner was still an hour away, and the room buzzed with overlapping conversations. Rachel was talking about a recent conference she attended in Boston. Vanessa explained how her husband had been invited to consult on a financial regulation panel. Their children chimed in occasionally with perfect timing, sharing small achievements and receiving instant praise. Lily remained quiet. Mark tried to start a conversation with my father about a science fair project his students had completed last week, but my father barely listened, instead shifting the conversation toward legal matters and judicial reform. I watched Lily carefully open a book she'd brought with her, settling into the corner of the sofa. No one invited her to join the games. None of the cousins glanced her way. Eventually, my mother came in to announce that dinner was ready. We all filed into the dining room, where the long table was perfectly set with white linens and gold-rimmed plates. The chandelier above sparkled with crystal light. Each child had a carefully arranged place setting, complete with a monogrammed name card, except Lily. I noticed the missing card immediately and moved quickly to sit beside her, gently guiding her to the nearest open seat. Mark sat across from us, his expression still and unreadable. My mother didn't apologize. She simply acted as if it had been a small oversight. Dinner passed in a blur. The roast was tender, the side dishes rich and varied, but the atmosphere around us was tight. Lily picked at her food. Each time she tried to speak, once about a book she loved, another time about an art project at school, someone cut her off or changed the topic. At one point, she looked up at me with wide eyes that seemed to ask if this was really how it had to be. I reached under the table and held her hand. When dessert arrived, a selection of delicate pastries and a towering croquembouche, the children were praised again for their performances in school, their upcoming competitions, and future plans. No one asked Lily a single question. As the night went on, the difference in how she was treated became impossible to ignore. My sisters noticed it too, their glances occasionally drifting toward me with unease, but they said nothing. Later, back in the foyer as we prepared to leave, my mother handed out small wrapped boxes to each child. Vanessa's kids opened theirs immediately, high-end headphones and luxury pens. Rachel's daughter received a digital microscope kit. Then she handed Lily a thin package wrapped in plain red paper. Lily unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a notebook and a glitter pen. Nothing more. My mother gave a short smile and said something about how children like to doodle. Lily looked down at the notebook. I waited for tears, but none came. She simply tucked it back into her bag, said thank you softly, and turned away. As we stepped outside into the snow, Mark wrapped his coat around her shoulders and walked ahead. I paused for a moment in the doorway, looking back into the glowing house, at the people still laughing, still sipping wine. For the first time, I felt something break quietly inside me. Something long overdue. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice. And I wasn't going to let them keep making it. The snowfall had picked up as we drove away from the mansion, large flakes floating slowly through the dark. The windshield wipers brushed them away in steady rhythm, the only sound in the car aside from the quiet hum of the heater. Lily sat in the back seat, her face turned toward the window, though I could see from the reflection that her eyes were open wide, unmoving. Mark kept his eyes on the road, both hands tight on the steering wheel. His knuckles looked pale under the glow of the dashboard. I sat silently beside him, watching the empty streets go by, still holding the small glitter pen and notebook on my lap. Lily hadn't wanted to touch them. Once we got home, Lily went straight upstairs without a word. I followed her but didn't speak. She changed into her pajamas and climbed into bed. I sat at the edge of the mattress, brushing her hair behind her ear. Her face looked older tonight, tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not from the day, but from the weight of something heavier. She turned to face the wall. I stayed until her breathing slowed and deepened. Then I turned off the light and went back downstairs. Mark was in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of water. He handed me one without saying anything. We sat at the table, both glasses untouched. The silence between us was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that builds between people who understand each other too well. Eventually, I opened the group chat that my siblings and I used to plan family events. The last message was from Rachel, a cheerful photo from earlier that day showing her daughter with her new microscope. I hesitated, then typed slowly. Just wanted to say Lily had a tough time today. She tried really hard to connect with Mom and Dad. The reply didn't come right away. Mark stood, rinsed his glass, and went upstairs. I remained seated, staring at the screen. Then the first response appeared. Vanessa said she hadn't noticed anything unusual. Rachel followed with a single line. I thought the notebook was thoughtful. I didn't reply. I went to bed but barely slept. My thoughts circled endlessly, replaying each moment from the day, looking for something I could have done differently. But every scene felt the same. The polite silence, the cold smiles, the empty glances. The next morning, I woke up early and made pancakes. I let Lily sleep in. When she came down, she was quiet, but she gave a small smile when she saw the chocolate chips shaped like a heart on her plate. Mark ruffled her hair and said he was going to take her to the bookstore later. After they left, I checked my messages again. This time, there were more responses. Rachel had sent a longer message, saying she hadn't meant to minimize anything and that she did think our parents were too hard on Lily sometimes. Vanessa hadn't said anything else. By evening, Rachel called. I picked up, and we spoke carefully, like people stepping through a minefield. She admitted she'd seen how our parents treated Lily, but hadn't wanted to cause a scene. She said she'd felt the same when her daughter chose art club over science camp last year, and how her mother made a remark about wasting potential. We both fell quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stayed with me. It's not just about what they gave Lily. It's what they didn't give her. The space to feel seen. That night, I sat with Lily in her room. She was coloring with a new set of pastels we'd gotten her for school. I asked her if she wanted to talk about yesterday. She shrugged and kept drawing. I asked if she'd felt hurt. She paused, looked at her picture, and said she just didn't understand why Grandma didn't like her pictures. I told her that sometimes people forget how important art can be. That some people are so focused on things they can measure, they forget about the things that make people feel. She nodded slowly. The next few days passed quietly. Mark and I decided not to go back for New Year's. My parents didn't call to ask why. Vanessa didn't mention it. Rachel sent a simple message saying she understood. Then, late one night, I got a message from Rachel that simply said, "We need to talk." She called the next day and told me she'd been thinking about how much we, as siblings, had been doing for our parents. The medical appointments, the insurance renewals, the monthly donations to their preferred charities, almost all of it had come from our effort or money. I listened as she laid it all out. She was angry, but underneath that was guilt. For staying silent for too long. For playing along with a system that rewarded some grandchildren and ignored others. We began to talk about change. Not the kind that comes from lectures or arguments, but real, practical changes. Rachel said she was going to step back from organizing their medical visits. She had already told them to manage their own transportation to the hospital next month. I told her I'd been considering the same. I hadn't wanted to escalate things, but Lily deserved better. Vanessa still hadn't replied. That weekend, Mark took Lily ice skating. When they came back, her cheeks were red and her eyes bright. She told me about how she almost fell but didn't. She said she was going to paint what it felt like to spin on the ice. I sat at the kitchen table later that evening and started writing a letter to my parents. I didn't intend to send it, at least not yet. But I needed to write something down. I told them how Lily had offered them a gift, and they returned it with silence. How their standards for what counted as valuable had become so narrow that they were pushing love out of the picture. I wrote about how we would not be returning until things changed. Not just for show, but at the core. Then I folded the letter and placed it in my drawer. For now, I would wait. But not forever. A few days after New Year's, the days began to settle into a soft, quiet rhythm again. The decorations around the neighborhood slowly came down, replaced by bare trees and gray skies. Our house returned to its usual warmth, meals around the table, Lily's schoolwork spread across the living room, Mark helping her build a model of the solar system from foam balls and string. We didn't speak much about Christmas anymore, but it still lingered in small ways. Lily no longer brought out her sketch pad in the evenings the way she used to. Her drawings became fewer, simpler. She still smiled, still laughed at Mark's jokes, but something inside her had pulled back just a little. I kept waiting for a call from my parents, but none came. Not even to ask why we had missed New Year's dinner. No message, no polite inquiry. It was as if our absence had been noted and then ignored. Rachel messaged me once to say she had heard nothing either. Vanessa remained silent, though I noticed she'd stopped sending updates to our family group chat. On a quiet Thursday morning, I walked into Lily's room to wake her for school and found her already dressed, her backpack neatly zipped. She looked at me with a small smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. She told me she had a group project to present that day, something about local heroes, and that she had picked Frida Kahlo. I asked why, and she said it was because Kahlo painted things people didn't always understand, but still made them feel something. I wanted to hug her right then, but she was already walking down the hall toward breakfast. At school, I had meetings most of the day, but my thoughts kept drifting. During lunch, I opened the letter I had written weeks ago, the one I hadn't sent. I reread it slowly, line by line. It still felt true. But now, I wasn't sure it was enough. Words alone wouldn't change anything. Later that night, Rachel called again. She had spoken to Vanessa and said the conversation hadn't gone well. Vanessa still believed we were overreacting. She said she hadn't seen anything cruel, just differences in interest. Rachel had tried to explain that it wasn't about the gifts or the words, it was about the way they made Lily feel invisible. Rachel said something else, too. That maybe it was time we stopped pretending things would just fix themselves. Our parents had created a hierarchy, even within their own family, and we had allowed it to grow for years. That weekend, we gathered at Rachel's apartment in the city. It was the first time in years the three of us had been together without our parents. Vanessa didn't come. Rachel had made tea, and the three of us sat around her kitchen table while Lily and her daughter played quietly in the other room. Rachel opened her laptop and started listing all the things we managed for our parents, the monthly bill payments, medical appointments, club memberships, home insurance renewals, and the charity event schedules. I added that I had been handling their property tax submissions every year since my father retired, that their lawyer had been calling me directly for months. Rachel nodded. She had been paying for their driver service. We sat there in silence for a while, listening to the muffled laughter from the other room. Rachel finally said she was done. Done pretending that love should come without respect. Done covering for them. We agreed on a plan, not out of revenge, but to make space for something better. If our parents wanted the benefits of a family, they needed to show that they could give back more than just tradition and polished dinners. The next day, Rachel sent an email to the clinic confirming the cancellation of their regular transport. I contacted the property maintenance company and asked them to take my name off the monthly service agreement. Rachel also stopped her automatic payment to the country club dues. We didn't announce it. We simply stepped away. A week passed. Then another. The silence from Birchfield Lane remained. Then came a call, not to me, but to Mark. My father had apparently called our house line and left a message when no one picked up. Mark played it for me that evening. The voice was clipped, composed. My father said he hoped we were well and mentioned that a few things around the house were falling behind. There was no apology. No question about Lily. Just a brief update and a mention that perhaps we could meet for lunch soon. We didn't respond. Then came a second message. This time from my mother. She said they had missed us during the holidays and wondered if Lily had received the notebook. Her tone was light, almost casual, as if nothing had happened. That night, I found Lily sitting by the window with her sketch pad. It was the first time I'd seen her draw in days. She showed me a picture of a tree with wide roots and a small bird sitting in the branches. She asked if Grandma was mad at her. I told her no, and that none of it was her fault. She nodded but didn't speak. The next weekend, Rachel invited us over for dinner. Lily and her cousins played for hours while the three of us sat in the living room, tired but relieved. It was the first time in a long while that I had felt something close to peace. Later that evening, Rachel stood in the kitchen with me while we washed dishes. She said maybe our parents weren't capable of real change. That maybe this was just the way they were and always would be. I looked at Lily, sitting on the carpet with a puzzle, and said I didn't need them to change everything. I just needed them to see her. Not as a disappointment. Not as a placeholder. But as herself. Rachel dried a plate and placed it on the counter. Then, she said something simple. If they can't do that, They don't get to be in her life. I nodded. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about what kind of family we were willing to be. Not the one on display in framed portraits and annual newsletters, but the one that showed up, listened, and stayed, even when it was hard. Especially then. The following week passed without a word from my parents. The snow had started to melt in patches, leaving behind slush on the sidewalks and gray streaks on the roads. Life continued in small, quiet ways. I returned to school where the children were still full of holiday stories. Mark coached the science club through a model rocket project. Lily painted a picture of a lake with fog curling over the surface and hung it in the hallway without saying much about it. There was a calm in our house that I hadn't realized we'd been missing. Without the weight of forced visits, there was more time for laughter. Mark cooked new recipes on Sunday afternoons. Lily started writing a story in a lined notebook she kept tucked beside her pillow. We didn't speak much about the past month, but something had shifted. Then one evening, Rachel called again. She said she had just gotten off the phone with our parents. The conversation had been brief. Our mother had asked if Rachel could resume her help with their hospital appointments. Rachel had declined. She told me that, for the first time, she had said the words out loud. That she couldn't keep helping people who showed no kindness to her niece. Our mother's reaction was cold. She asked if Rachel was trying to punish them. Rachel said no, she was setting a boundary. There was no argument, just an abrupt goodbye. After the call, Rachel had sat in silence for a long time. She told me she didn't feel triumphant, only tired, but also clearer than she'd felt in years. That weekend, we met at a small cafe to go over the rest of our shared responsibilities. Rachel had printed out a list of the various things each of us had been quietly doing for our parents. It stretched across 2 pages. I had been renewing their homeowner's insurance for 6 years. Rachel had handled their driver's payroll. Vanessa, though quiet about her stance, had been overseeing their legal correspondence. We talked about what would happen if we stepped away entirely. Would they hire help? Ask someone else? Or would they try to manage on their own, unprepared and unwilling to admit how much we had carried? Rachel thought they might reach out eventually. Not out of love, but necessity. We decided we needed to be ready. Not to return everything to the way it was, but to offer a new structure, one based on mutual responsibility, not silent sacrifice. Back at home that night, I sat in the living room while Lily painted at the table. She was working on a piece with long tree branches and a girl standing underneath, looking up. The girl had bright red boots and a yellow coat. It looked a little like Lily, though she hadn't said that. I asked her if she'd want to go back to Birchfield Lane someday. She thought for a while before answering. Then she said maybe, if they said they were sorry. Her voice didn't carry bitterness. Just quiet honesty. I nodded and said maybe one day they would. The next few days were uneventful. Mark taught his classes, Lily studied for a spelling test, and I attended a professional development session on literacy tools. Our world felt small but full. Then, on a cold Monday morning, the first letter arrived. It was addressed in my mother's neat handwriting. The envelope was cream-colored and thick. I opened it slowly, unsure what to expect. Inside was a note, written in formal, careful language. She hoped we were well. She mentioned the weather and how the roses in the back garden hadn't survived the last frost. Then came a short paragraph about Lily. She wrote that she had been thinking about her lately, that she regretted how the holidays had gone. She didn't use the word sorry. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it in the drawer with the others I'd written but never sent. Later that evening, I told Mark about it. He asked if I thought it meant anything. I said I wasn't sure. That night, Lily fell asleep quickly. I stood by her door for a moment, listening to the sound of her breathing. The quiet of it. The steadiness. The next morning, I replied with a short note. I said thank you for the letter. I mentioned Lily was doing well. I didn't say more. We continued living in our quiet rhythm. But there was something else building now, too. Not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. A readiness for change, if it ever came. A week later, Rachel told me our parents had reached out again, this time to her husband, asking if he might help them organize some medical paperwork. He politely declined. Then Vanessa finally responded in the group chat. She had been silent for weeks. Her message was short. She said she had told our parents she wouldn't be available to help with legal matters anymore unless they changed how they treated everyone in the family. She didn't go into detail, but the message stood out. It meant she had finally taken a step, even if a small one. That weekend, Lily finished her painting. She asked if we could frame it. We went to the local craft store and picked a simple wooden frame with a dark finish. We hung it in the living room above the bookshelf. She stood back and looked at it for a long time. Then she smiled, a full smile this time. I asked her what she would paint next. She said maybe something about forgiveness. Or maybe not. Maybe something about being free. I told her I liked that idea. And I meant it. 2 weeks passed before anything else happened. Winter began to retreat, not fully, but in small signs, a stretch of sunlight that lasted longer in the afternoon, the first patches of brown grass showing beneath the snow. Life continued, steady and quiet. Lily returned to her usual rhythm at school. Her teacher sent a message saying she'd shown real growth in her writing assignments. At night, she sat at the kitchen table working on a short story about a girl who could turn invisible and only became visible when someone truly saw her. Mark and I exchanged glances when she read us the first few paragraphs. The metaphor was clear, but she didn't speak about it that way. She just smiled and said she liked the idea of someone becoming visible through kindness. Then one Thursday evening, Rachel called again. This time, her voice was tight, controlled but worried. Our father had been taken to the emergency room after a fall in the backyard. It hadn't been serious, just a sprained wrist and a few bruises, but it had exposed something none of us had anticipated. He'd been home alone. No driver, no assistant, no scheduled check-in. My mother had been at a lunch event and hadn't picked up her phone for hours. The fall had happened sometime around noon. He hadn't called an ambulance. He'd waited until she returned. Rachel said our mother had called her afterward, not to ask for help, but to vent her frustration. She said things had become chaotic lately, that she didn't have time to deal with everything. She asked if Rachel could resume her role with the medical appointments. Rachel said no again. Firmly this time. After the call, I sat with the news for a while. I thought about the old version of our family, the polished version, where everything looked fine on the outside, glittering events, trimmed gardens, long holiday tables. And I thought about how quickly that surface had cracked once the quiet work holding it up was withdrawn. I called Vanessa later that evening. We hadn't spoken directly in weeks. She picked up on the second ring. We talked for a while, mostly about neutral things, until I asked if she had heard about the fall. She had. Then she surprised me. She said she had visited them 2 days ago. Our mother had seemed tired, older than usual. The house was colder than it used to be, she said. Not just from the winter. Vanessa said she didn't know what she was expecting, but it wasn't that. They had always seemed so composed, so unshakable. Now it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. I asked if she thought they were ready to change. She said she wasn't sure, but they might be ready to listen. The next day, a letter arrived. This time, from my father. His handwriting was more rigid, slightly shaky. The letter was shorter than I expected. He mentioned the fall. He said it had made him think. He didn't apologize. But he wrote that he missed us. That he missed Lily. Mark read the letter beside me. He handed it back and didn't say much. But he looked tired. Not from the day, but from all the quiet pain that had stretched over the years. Later that night, I found Lily sitting on her bed, sorting through her drawings. She was picking a few to take to school for an art show. She held one up, a drawing of a house with one side dark and the other filled with warm light. She said she didn't remember drawing it but liked it anyway. I asked if she'd want to see Grandma and Grandpa again. She thought for a while. Then she said maybe. But only if they were nice this time. The next morning, I replied to my father's letter. I kept it short. I said we were open to a conversation, but only if it was about real change, not appearances. The following week, another call came. This time, it was my mother. Her voice was softer than usual. She asked if we could come by. She said she wanted to talk. I told her we would think about it. That night, we sat down as a family. Mark and I explained the situation to Lily in simple terms. That Grandma and Grandpa wanted to talk. That we didn't know what would happen, but we would be with her the whole time. Lily didn't answer right away. Then she said she would go. But only if she could bring her sketch pad. On Saturday afternoon, we drove down Birchfield Lane again. The snow had mostly melted, but patches of white still clung to the edges of the lawn. The house looked the same from the outside, tall windows, dark wood doors, wreath long gone. We parked and sat in the car for a minute before stepping out. Lily held her sketch pad against her chest. Mark took her hand. I walked a few steps ahead and rang the bell. The door opened slower than usual. My mother stood there, no makeup, her hair pulled back. She looked tired. My father appeared behind her, his arm in a brace. They didn't smile. But they also didn't look away. We stepped inside. The house was quiet. No music, no smell of roasting meat or fresh pine. The warmth came only from the radiators, and the grand chandelier overhead was turned off. We walked into the living room. It was cleaner than I expected, but not polished. A few unopened letters sat on the console. A vase on the table held wilted flowers. We sat. My mother began speaking first. She didn't offer small talk. She said things had changed faster than they expected. That they were struggling. Then she said they had been wrong. Not just once, but many times. She looked at Lily when she said it. Lily sat quietly, sketch pad still in her lap. My father spoke next. He said they hadn't seen what they should have. That their pride had clouded more than just their judgment. It had clouded their ability to feel. He looked down when he spoke. There were no dramatic apologies, no speeches. Just a quiet admittance that the way things were had not worked. And that they wanted to try again. I looked at Lily. She opened her sketch pad, flipped to a page, and held it out. It was a drawing of a bridge. Nothing more. Just a bridge, simple and clean, stretching across two hills. My mother looked at it, her hand trembling slightly. We didn't say much after that. We left shortly after. But something had changed. Not finished. Not healed. Just begun. The following days passed in a strange, in-between state. Nothing had been promised, no real commitments made, yet there was a shift in the air. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, and it wasn't trust. But it was something close to acknowledgement, and after so many years of silence, that felt like a beginning. At home, Lily seemed lighter. She still kept her sketch pad close, but now she left her drawings out on the table without worry. She even started leaving small notes with her pictures, just a line or two explaining what she'd drawn. A red bird watching a sunrise. A girl flying over rooftops. A family standing under the stars. One afternoon, her art teacher called. She had submitted Lily's drawings to a citywide children's art showcase. A panel of artists had selected hers for display at the local gallery. The event would take place in 2 weeks, and each student would stand beside their work to answer questions from visitors. When I told Lily the news, she simply stared at me, as if waiting for the part where I explained there had been a mistake. But when I repeated it slowly, her face broke into a smile so wide I thought it might stay that way forever. We celebrated with hot chocolate and homemade brownies. Mark lifted her onto his shoulders and told her she was already more famous than he'd ever be. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat up with a pencil and her smallest notebook, sketching ideas for what to wear. Meanwhile, the silence from Birchfield Lane remained, but now it felt different. There was no longer a wall between us, but a door slightly ajar. One day, my father left a voicemail asking if he could attend the gallery event. He said he understood if the answer was no. I played the message twice before telling Mark. He said it should be Lily's choice. We asked her gently. She looked unsure at first. Then she asked if they would come just to watch or to say something. I told her we didn't know. She thought about it, then nodded. They could come. On the day of the showcase, Lily wore a yellow dress and a small blue ribbon in her hair. She asked if she looked like herself, and when I said yes, she smiled and picked up her folder of drawings. The gallery was modest, tucked into a side street downtown, with soft lighting and white walls lined with artwork of all kinds. Children's drawings, paintings, and collages filled the space with color. Parents walked through slowly, whispering to one another, pointing at pictures with gentle pride. Lily stood beside her artwork, 3 framed drawings, the tree with the red boots, the foggy lake, and the bridge. She had written a few sentences for each one, explaining what they meant to her. Mark and I stood nearby, giving her space. Occasionally someone stopped to ask her a question. She answered quietly, but without fear. Then I saw them. My parents had entered through the side entrance. My mother wore a dark coat and carried a small purse. My father walked slower than usual, still favoring the arm that had been injured. They looked around the room, unsure where to stand. Lily noticed them too. She didn't speak. She didn't wave. She simply returned her attention to a boy beside her asking about her drawing of the lake. Eventually, my parents moved closer. They stood a few feet away, waiting. My mother glanced at Lily's drawings. My father read the short descriptions aloud under his breath. After a while, Lily turned toward them. She didn't speak right away. Then she asked if they had a favorite. My mother said the bridge. My father said the red boots. Lily nodded, then turned back to the wall. They didn't stay long. Just enough to see, maybe enough to feel something. When they left, they gave a small wave. Lily nodded again, not with anger, not with warmth either. Something in between. On the way home, Lily was quiet but not withdrawn. When I asked if she was okay, she said she was tired. Then she leaned her head against the car window and watched the city pass by. At home, she took off the ribbon and placed it in her desk drawer. She didn't mention the gallery again, but she kept her name tag from the event pinned to the corner of her corkboard. 2 days later, a package arrived in the mail. There was no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a new set of watercolors, high quality, the kind sold in art supply stores we rarely visited. There was no card. Lily opened the box, looked inside, then closed it again. She placed it on her shelf without a word. That evening, she drew a small picture of a sprout pushing through cracked earth. She left it on the kitchen table. Mark and I looked at it together after she went to bed. We didn't say anything. There was nothing to add. Growth wasn't fast. It wasn't easy, but it had started. The next few weeks passed with a quiet steadiness. The snow was gone now, replaced by damp sidewalks and the occasional gust of wind that carried early hints of spring. Buds began to appear on trees, and Lily spent more time by the window, sketching the changing branches or reading books about flowers and gardens. She seemed more open again, though still cautious. Her sketchpad remained her safest space, but now she let Mark and me look through it more often, sometimes even asking for our thoughts. My parents didn't call. No letters arrived. The watercolor set stayed on Lily's shelf untouched, and she made no mention of it. I didn't bring it up either. One afternoon, Rachel stopped by for coffee. We sat at the kitchen table while Lily worked on a poster in the other room for an upcoming class presentation. Rachel asked how things had been, and I told her about the gallery and the package. She listened, stirring her tea slowly, then said it sounded like our parents were trying. Not succeeding, maybe not understanding, but trying. I told her I wasn't sure if effort counted when it came so late. Rachel nodded. Then she said sometimes trying was all some people could manage. That night, while cleaning up, I found Lily's poster leaning against the wall. It was about Frida Kahlo again. Bold letters at the top read, "Art isn't just pictures. It's how we speak when words fail." I stared at it for a long time before moving it to the table where she could keep working on it in the morning. The next weekend, we stayed home. Mark grilled in the backyard, even though the ground was still soft and damp, and Lily helped carry out plates and cups. We ate outside with jackets on, laughing about how early we were pushing the season. It felt good. Simple. That evening, just as the sky turned orange, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my parents standing there. They hadn't called or written in advance. My mother held a wrapped bundle in her arms. My father stood with his hands in his coat pockets. I hesitated in the doorway. Mark appeared behind me, silent. Lily was inside, humming to herself as she cleaned her brushes in the kitchen sink. My father cleared his throat. He said they didn't want to stay long. They just wanted to return something. My mother held out the bundle. I took it and stepped back so they could come inside. We moved to the living room, where the light was fading. My mother sat down carefully on the edge of the couch. My father remained standing. I opened the bundle slowly. Inside was the watercolor painting Lily had given them at Christmas, the one they had dismissed without a glance. But now it was in a wooden frame, matted in soft white, the colors protected under clear glass. They said they had finally hung it in the front hallway. That people had asked about it. That my mother had started telling them it was from their granddaughter, the artist in the family. Lily walked into the room just then, carrying a towel. She paused when she saw them, but didn't retreat. My father spoke first. He said the painting had reminded him of a wreath from his childhood. Something simple and quiet, made from scraps and ribbons. Something his own mother had hung on their door each year. My mother said nothing at first. Then she looked at Lily and asked, gently, if she would come sit beside her. Lily didn't move. My mother began to speak, slowly, carefully. She said she had been wrong. That she had expected certain things without ever asking what Lily actually loved. That she had judged too quickly and spoken too sharply. She didn't use many words, but her hands shook slightly as she spoke. Lily looked at her for a long time. Then she sat down, not beside her, but nearby. My father said they didn't expect anything in return. They just wanted her to know they saw her now. Lily reached for the painting. She touched the glass lightly, then said she was glad they put it in a frame. They stayed only a few more minutes. My mother asked if Lily had any recent drawings, and Lily said maybe she'd show them next time. My father thanked us again before they left. After they were gone, the house felt still. Mark looked at me and asked if I believed them. I said I didn't know yet. But it was the first time they had come to our door without pride leading the way. Lily placed the framed painting on the mantel. She said it didn't need to go back to their house. It could stay here now. That night, I found her writing in the notebook she kept hidden under her pillow. She didn't hide it when I walked in. She said she was writing about the bridge again. Not the one in her drawing, but a new one. One that built itself a little more each time someone told the truth. I kissed her forehead and turned off the light. She rolled over and fell asleep without another word. Outside, the wind had calmed, and the trees stood quietly against the darkening sky. Something in the house felt different. Not healed, not complete. But something had opened. Spring arrived slowly, with longer stretches of sunlight and the faint smell of earth returning to the air. The neighborhood trees began to bloom in pale pinks and soft whites, and Lily started keeping a journal of the changes she noticed outside. When the first robin returned, how the daffodils leaned toward the light, what shape the clouds took on windy mornings. Her sketchpad filled with softer colors now, lighter lines. There was still distance in her drawings, a kind of quietness, but it no longer felt heavy. My parents didn't visit again right away. They sent a few small notes, most of them simple. An invitation to tea. A comment on the weather. Once, a question about Lily's school. Each one was addressed to all three of us. They no longer ignored Mark. They didn't use my maiden name. I didn't respond to all of them, but I didn't throw them away either. Then one day, an envelope arrived that wasn't from them. It came from the local public library. Inside was an invitation to a community art event, an afternoon for children to display their artwork and teach simple techniques to visitors. Lily had been nominated by her school to be one of the participants. She was excited, but also nervous. Teaching others felt different than drawing alone. Still, she started planning her small table. She wanted to show how to blend colors with watercolor pencils and how to make skies feel wide. As she prepared, another letter came from my parents. They asked if they could come. This time, not to be seen, just to be present. I asked Lily if she was okay with it. She thought about it, then said yes, but they had to sit like everyone else, not in the front, not asking for attention. The event took place in the main hall of the library, with folding tables arranged in rows and paper banners hanging overhead. Children stood proudly behind their displays while parents wandered through with coffee cups and soft voices. Lily's table was near the center. She wore a pale blue shirt and had pinned her name tag over her heart. She laid out her materials carefully and practiced her short speech 3 times the night before. When the event started, she stood tall and calm. People stopped to ask questions. She explained things clearly, even smiled. Then, from the side door, my parents entered. They didn't come forward. They stood quietly near the back, watching as Lily helped a younger child blend 2 shades of green to make a forest color. My mother had no makeup on. My father held his coat over one arm. They looked smaller than they used to. Not in size, but in presence. They stayed for almost an hour. They didn't speak to Lily until she had finished helping the last child. Then, carefully, they approached. My mother asked if she could try blending 2 colors. Lily handed her a pencil and a small piece of scrap paper. My mother sat down and drew a leaf. It wasn't well done, but Lily said nothing. My father asked about the trees in one of her paintings. He said they reminded him of a park he used to visit as a boy. Lily didn't say much, but she listened. They didn't stay long. Before they left, my mother asked if Lily might come to the house one weekend, not for a party, just to walk in the garden. Lily looked at me. I told her it was her choice. She said maybe. When we got home that afternoon, Lily didn't mention them. She talked about the children she had helped, how one girl had drawn a pink giraffe, how another wanted to paint the moon. She seemed lighter. That evening, Mark and I sat on the porch while Lily watered the small garden bed we had started along the fence. She talked to the flowers as if they were old friends. Mark asked if I thought the change in my parents was real. I said I didn't know, but I saw them trying. And I saw Lily holding her ground. Later that week, a letter came addressed just to Lily. Inside was a hand-drawn card from my father. It was simple, just a picture of a tree, clearly copied from one of her drawings, with the words "Thank you" written underneath. She taped it to the back of her bedroom door. We continued to keep boundaries. My parents were not suddenly woven back into our daily lives. But the silence between us was no longer a wall. One Sunday, they came to our house for dinner. Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti and salad. They brought no gifts, no dramatic apologies. We ate quietly, with breaks in conversation that weren't uncomfortable. Lily showed them a few new paintings. They asked questions, small ones, careful. At the end of the night, my mother asked Lily for help picking flowers from the yard. They walked slowly together, stopping often. I watched from the porch as Lily pointed at a small bloom and my mother leaned down to see it. That night, after Lily went to sleep, I sat with Mark on the couch. We didn't talk much. We just listened to the quiet hum of the house. It was different now. Still fragile, but real. The end of the school year came with warmer air, longer days, and the gentle hum of lawnmowers in the neighborhood. Lily brought home her report card tucked inside a folder full of drawings and stories. Her teacher had written a note at the bottom. She has grown so much this year, not only in skill, but in confidence. We're proud of her, and she should be proud of herself. We pinned the note to the refrigerator, next to her drawing of the bridge. It had become something of a symbol in our home, though we rarely spoke about it out loud. Lily had stopped calling it the bridge. Now she just referred to it as the first one. On the first Saturday of June, my parents invited us to their house, not for a formal event or a dinner, but for something they called a gathering. It was meant to be small. Just the immediate family. No caterers. No announcements. We discussed it as a family. Lily wasn't hesitant. She said she'd like to go, as long as it didn't feel like Christmas. I promised her it wouldn't. When we arrived, the front lawn was trimmed, but not perfect. The rose bushes had been cut back, the petals scattered on the walkway. Inside, the house felt quieter than usual. A few family photos had been rearranged. Some were gone. In their place were smaller frames, Lily's art, simple scenes drawn in pencil and watercolor. There were no uniforms this time. My father wore a soft cardigan. My mother had flower on her sleeve. In the kitchen, she was baking something by hand, a peach cobbler. She said it was a recipe her own mother used to make. Lily stood by the doorway, watching. My mother asked if she wanted to help with the crust. Lily shrugged and stepped forward. The two of them stood side by side, working slowly. There was no rush. The rest of the afternoon passed gently. We sat in the sunroom with glasses of lemonade. My sisters arrived, each with their children. Rachel brought a basket of strawberries. Vanessa, who had once stayed silent through everything, gave Lily a new sketchbook and said it was time for another volume. Lily smiled and said maybe she'd fill this one with only trees. My father asked about Lily's next art show. She explained it was at the community center, smaller than the last, but she was excited. He said he'd like to come if that was all right. She nodded. At one point, my mother sat with me in the garden. She didn't talk much at first. She watched Lily chase a butterfly across the grass. Then she said she had spent too long believing that certain kinds of success were the only kinds that mattered. She said she had confused order with love. She asked if I thought it was too late to be a better grandmother. I told her that Lily didn't need perfection. She just needed honesty. Later that evening, before we left, my father helped Lily tie her shoes. She was growing so fast now, her feet almost the same size as mine. He said she reminded him of someone, but he couldn't place who. Maybe it wasn't anyone. Maybe it was just Lily. When we drove home, the windows were down and Lily let her hand drift out into the wind. She said she had fun and that the cobbler wasn't too sweet, just warm. A week later, Lily stood at the front of the community center for her show. My parents sat quietly in the back. They didn't wave. They didn't interrupt. They just watched. Afterward, my father gave her a small notebook. Not as a gift, but as a suggestion. He said maybe she could write poems to go with her drawings. She said she'd think about it. That night, she read us one of them. It was short. A bridge made of branches. Held up by hope. Crossed by those who walk slowly. We framed it. The seasons turned again. Summer came and went, and fall crept in through the windows. Our house remained full of the same soft sounds, pages turning, pencils scratching, water running in the sink. My parents visited now and then. They brought less with them. Fewer expectations, fewer explanations. Sometimes just a bag of apples or a hand-picked book. They asked more questions. They listened more. There were still stumbles. Moments when old habits peeked through. A sharp comment, a rushed assumption. But they passed. And when they didn't, we spoke up. Boundaries had become a kind of quiet scaffolding strong enough to hold the new shape we were building. One evening in late autumn, Lily finished another bridge drawing. This one stretched wider than the first, with thicker beams and more light. She taped it to the wall beside the others. I asked her what this one was called. She said it didn't have a name. It just was. I watched her walk away, the soft shuffle of her socks against the floor. We had come a long way. Not in a straight line, not without pain. But we had arrived somewhere new. And for the first time, it felt like family.